is in the Northcom apparatus, which is advancing quickly. Now, that involves weaponizing immigration, which has happened in hundreds of years of history. In Ireland, it happened in Palestine, where there becomes a presumption, a delusion that there's a supreme authority that the efforts are obeying, the oversouls, the elite, the oligarchy, whatever you want to call their organized groupings, Rothschild. So they come in and they say, okay, we need to demonize everybody who's not on board. So you start by treating a difference as predicated dispute on mere independence. The two aspects of the UN complex, which is a international religious corporation due to the Temple of Understanding, doesn't like two things. One, individuality, and two, property. And property is a part of the pursuit of happiness under the attributes of life and possession. In other words, you possess a living place way before the word property came along. There are several histories of property. I've got several doctrines in front of me that I can pull up quickly. But in the advancement from dispute, from difference to dispute, it basically runs like this. You call a difference a dispute. You advance the dispute to a disruption. You go from disruption into a social discord. You go from there into a criminality series. And finally you advance it to a act of terrorism, all based on non-conforming behavior. Now, in the audit book, profiling the intrusions, I'm looking at particular sections such as disruptive behavior. The crime actually went to protesters and a new crime of disrupting major events. So what happened, this is very, very important for people to comprehend. You have, under Admiralty law, which is international innovative law, which goes back in a long history of where their concepts of law evolved, the infractions of particular administrative forms have advanced to criminal penalty, meaning that there's no crime involved, but your infraction of disrupting an administrative issue is advanced to a crime. And the reason was to expand widen the scope of plausible guilt. The use of the new warfare, obviously, a large part of it goes into the psychological operations, the media. And you'll always notice the media always demonizes, disenfranchises, and criminalizes at every opportunity anyone who dissents. There's always a little bit of wording there that the media demonstrates that it is on board with the process. And the process ideology is to force people into collaborative governance. In other words, they're dissuading the people from assembling anywhere. They really want them to go into the collaborative form of thinking. Now, collaborative governance has some other names embedded inside, but one is participatory democracy, deliberative democracy, and basically a proportional democracy. Proportional democracy has a lot of aspects to it. One is to create a fictitious class of people, affirmative action, protected group status, and so forth. Now, they're played against each other. These are not enhancing the liberty of people. These are taking away, and they legislate supervised rights and limited rights. The lawyers all know what I'm talking about, and probably a lot of them just hate this discussion because the lawyers are controlled through their allegiance under the bar system. And the bar has a long history, and I can go into that some other time. I've got 86 pages in front of me on bar lawyers that summarizes what is a bar lawyer. British accredited registry, British administrative registry. Nevertheless, that Esquire after a lawyer's name means that they have allegiance to the King and Queen of England. Now, most people cannot comprehend the level of what's going on, and cognitive dissonance kicks in. They shut down. It's beyond their ability to comprehend it. Their revulsion cannot kick in. And I assure you that the UN knows that the only thing that has saved the planet at some degree in humanity, people's revulsion, not their unity, not unity, revulsion against the acts of Holocaust, genocide, austerity, and everything that has now become conditioned. The addictive programming is kicking into where people will accept all kinds of atrocities, such as extrajudicial killing, unmanned aerial attack vehicles killing, say, 5 or 6 family members to get the perpetrator, which was never identified. The actuality is that the number of terrorists killed on the planet is so small that it's humorous and tragic to even use it, considering the so-called collateral impact and damage, which dehumanizes the person that they've murdered. Now, it's going on everywhere, and it goes on now in a softer, lower-level warfare in the United States. It involves the pandemic and all Hazards Preparedness Act complex, which is military. All of this has been advanced. President Obama has advanced these things into a tighter and tighter spike of agency secretary of control at the federal level. Now, make no mistake about it. The federal government has partners. These partners are corporations. These corporations are county governments. They are state governments. All of the acts that are blamed on the federal government were done in concert with local authorities, and it's advancing under various military, police kinds of enforcement. The reason they're spiking the enforcement and going to the police state is that the system in itself is breaking down, obviously marked by the banking fraud and the absolute, incredibly dysfunctional Fed system of money being handed away in bailouts. There was the gentleman from Australia said basically we could give everybody a direct bailout in America and stop all of the mortgage default things. In an Indian country, that is big. The counties are basically using theft by deception and fraudulent conversion and conveyance to take Indian properties under these so-called tax deeds. By the time their lawyers get done in court with what's coming at them, and I mean co-defendants, federal, state, county, and city attorneys, and tribal attorneys, by the time they get out of court on this one, they're going to have egg all over their face, and it's not going to go down in history as very pretty. That's what's coming. There's nothing that can stop that. They set it off, they cause a reciprocal offensive, and they're going to get it. And there's nothing they can do to stop it. All they're going to have to sit back and is try to hide under their tables, because the lawyers are the targets. The people, the legislators, they're just on board. They're doing what they are told to do under collaborative governance and decision-making. The International Risk Governance Council is alive and up and running. They're a NGO kind of an organization. One thing is very important in your local communities to look at your little groups, your folk groups. These are not real people. I said this in a group once and they went wild. You're calling us not real people? Well, you know and I know the difference between an artificial and a natural human. They went wild, but after I explained to them that all their emails were government addresses, that they were persons of the state, they went silent. And they went deep cover. They went embedded deeper to keep from being found. So at the local level, what has to be done is basically, instead of rule cleansing, we need to do a little collaborative cleansing. Go in and look at them, audit them, look at their practices, because they're actually acting as government authorities now. They're called PGOs, private government organizations. Actually, they're corporate organizations, and the use of trusts is a way of stealing public assets and monies to buy land for corporations. And that's what's going on hidden in the trust doctrine. lefty law organizations such as at the University of Oregon are forwarding this kind of left-wing global mentality and are really on board and really using collaborative governance to instill innovative international law. And remember what that is. Innovative international law is what? Admiralty law. And admiralty law means that you can apply a criminal penalty to an administrative infraction. That's the advancement of the police state in technical terms.
This is all happening. It seems like it's coming to a head now. On one hand, people are waking up. I mean, even with the not necessarily the Occupy movement, but they are starting to think. They are starting to get out of their chairs. The internet is kind of a double-edged tool. We've got the ability to spread information around, but I think it isolates us too. You know, I would like to see more communities and more counties, let's say, organizing behind their sheriff. That's happening with Sheriff Richard Mack and about 10 sheriffs in Arizona, 10 sheriffs in California have already come out suggesting that the this whole situation with the feds, the BATF, same people that murdered almost 100 people at Waco, the same people that murdered more than 100 people in Oklahoma City, are now responsible for supplying the guns to the drug cartels. Excuse me? What is your analysis of that?
Well, what happens is in these Northcom applications, obviously they have to create sectarian tensions. The best way to do it is to pit the illegal trespassing entries against the rural people, which the rural land and natural assets are a big target. The assets in your country and from border to border are vast in the billions, and the only way to get at that is to break up the traditional forms of jurisdiction and absolute ownership. So the states' rights are not the final right, although they like to think that. That was created under the various European, British doctrines and the king and queen stuff. I'll give you an example of the ecclesiastical law and how it's applied in ownership assumptions. The screening points, what would be important to the sheriffs in all counties is the screening point authorities, and I go into this in the audit system. And basically there are ways of locking down people, and I've got it in front of me. Basically, the channeling of expertise and limited movement has come down to only allowing business people to move freely. Now this comes out of the North American community. The Council on Foreign Relations is handling that, and the Security and Prosperity Partnership. This goes all the way back into the Treaty of Paris and the Schuman Plan and things like that. But the North American Cooperative Council, along with many organizations, really have come up with two kinds of systems. One is for the businessmen and who's on board, and it's literally the movement of business persons. Notice that word persons. This is under the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative, WHPI, Trusted Traveler Permit System, Green Visas. So as you're looking into this, you're going to see that they have a global trusted worker pass system. Basically, in the so-called global trade liberalization, they need to move common labor around. There's two types of labor to move around. One is as the Hispanic population begins to exit the United States, they're going to get picked up going that direction. The undocumented worker thing was just merely used to push the sectarian tensions. The way we go in and look at communities, we put a team of auditors together, and we, meaning Infraspect, we go in and we look at communities, we look at the dysfunction, and then we look at the underlying motives of particular vested interests. Usually we're going to find vested interests are fairly covert, fairly oblique, but nevertheless are taking natural assets or creating derivative speculation to bleed the community's public tax base. And I'm sitting here looking at it saying, well, where would I start and end on this discussion? That's a whole other show, but I know that the county sheriffs are very important, and they spend a lot of time wrecking their budgets and getting them into so-called federal standards. They're not standards at all. They're merely arbitrary policies. Standard is something else, and it's abused because they want conformity out of each officer. Now, the unfortunate part for a lot of the, I call them the Bubba officers that are on board, is they're going to have to face their community and their family head on one day. And this is not my opinion. This is a parallel observation with every other country in the world that has gone through the structured conflict and controlled opposition scenarios. The methods of dealing with this are laid out in the audit system. The two books address public participation and how to deal with the corrupted systems. Two address the sciences and the fake environmental movement. And it is a fake environmental. It's not a green movement. It's a red movement. And it's a collaborative movement. A lot of the advancement of collaborative governance happened in the environmental areas. The environmental community. What community is that? I'm talking about the Pew Trust, the bank, the International Monetary Fund, the Club of Rome. What environmental movement is that? Prince Philip, who wants to come back as a virus and kill all the people. So, Al Gore, derivative speculation man. All of those movements are so corrupt that they're embarrassing their own internal key personnel. I work with a few environmental groups, and I get the inside information on what's going on in the environmental movement. And believe me, it's a daily struggle to not talk about anything except keep the global issue going. Everything's contextualized in a global issue. Now, there's your local people, your local sectarian tensions are always provided a synthesis or a solution at the global level. Above and beyond all of this, and what they call overboard laws, is the thing I mentioned before, obviously, about admiralty. That is civil infractions with criminal penalty. This is force of law, not rule of law. It's bad enough that you have a myth of rule of law, which is a fake face on fairness. But we're now moved into, in the police state system, as they call it, basically you're looking at force of law. It doesn't matter. You're just going to obey the law. The officer says, what's your name? And you say, I'm not going to give it to you. Obviously, you're going to be hauled away. Now, you'll notice that the police are dressing more in a military combative uniform, and they also hide their faces more. These are not to keep a bullet from going through their face. This is to conceal their identity. And the reason is so they can go home and live in a local community and not get chastised for wrongful action. There's a paradox forming, and there are police officers who are going to have to make some conscionable choices and go against the acceptance of genocide, austerities, extrajudicial killing, and so forth. We're looking at certainly a moral crisis overall. But the problem is the American people think that the quality of life is income. Everything they think about every day they get up. And they're not worried about what I'm saying. They're worried about whether they're going to be able to get up and get the cheese in Indian country. Am I going to get my commodities? Am I going to get my light bill subsidized? Nobody asks or assembles for a protest against those high costs of living and their lack of purchasing power. They assemble to see if they're going to get a share of the welfare.
William, you know, it seems like when I come out with something, when I talk about something, it multiplies, it goes around the world. Somehow it gets altered a little bit so it doesn't quite have the intended results. The sheriff thing is happening right now. I set up this whole event over in Cochise County for Sheriff Deaver after meeting with him. And they've been tried to take that away. They've tried to take away my influence of that. They did the same thing with the Tea Parties, Why are they so afraid of me? Is it that, or I've got on the chat room right now, I've got people calling me KKK swine, KKK scum. You are dead. Rest in peace, Clay. I mean, this is, and we only got we only got a few people on here. We did have about 300, but it's almost straight. This goes beyond. I believe that the accident that I had 2004 May 20th was due to two Israeli companies tapping my phones, knowing exactly what route I was taking, what I was riding, what I looked like, and they waited for me. But in Arizona, I've been here 2 years. I don't have one person that I talk to. I don't have one person that that socializes with me, that calls me. And rumors started going around the biker bars, and I've been publishing biker magazines for almost 40 years. Oh, Clay's raising that money, selling that book, raising money to give to a snitch named Huevos. Sorry, boys, don't know any snitch named Huevos. I've been kicked out of bars, biker bars, after putting up this event for Sheriff Deaver that I hadn't even been into. So I walked into the bar and the bartender says, "Your name Clay?" "Yeah, you're barred." Where is that coming from? Where is that kind of it's like a local hatred or something. Oh man, that's Clay Douglas.
Well, that came out of the Tavistock Institute, Stanford Research, and the other apparatus that was developed by the RAND Corporation, and that was the isolate, alienate, disenfranchise, and terminate model, which is embedded in collaborative governance as well. One thing to understand is that the mentality that the hearts and mind model is a counterinsurgency model, and what they're after is the basically, when you come to all acts are prohibited unless otherwise authorized. And the mental model that you're talking about is real. It's well devised in the Delphi techniques of positivism. In other words, no contrary evidentiary facts are allowed whatsoever. There's some particular other ways of describing this, such as you're all in the same book and you're all on the same page. But here's what's going on about that. America is all on the same page, but they're reading the wrong book, and the collaborators are known as operative conditioners and intermediaries in the media and so forth. They keep everybody on the ground, on the same page, functionally specialized. In other words, the conflicts in your personality are only discussed in terms of tactics and strategies. They never allow why are they doing this to Clay Douglas. They always keep it in kind of they make up a story. They go in courtrooms, they make up stories all the time. Lawyers just make up stories. They just make up crap. And that's so do judges. They just make up stuff. They got a wide variety. In other words, you can go in a courtroom and both sides can have a prevailing argument. They're equally prevailing. And that's where the American public is on the either-or page. And they all read the same book, all try to stay on the same page. The fact of the matter is, instead of reading a new book and stay in their own chapter and use that interdisciplinary skill that the predators use, instead of using that dynamic organization of staying in your own chapter and regard the differences. The reason books have chapters is that there's individual ideas expressed in sequence through the chapters. And people in this country do not regard the difference. They respect one another according to their supervised instructions in what they call a ordered society. We respect the black, red, green, blue rights. No, they don't. They don't respect anything. They just say they do. Because if you regard the differences and they're regarding your difference, they would use your dialogue, your testimony, as evidence to get to the sum of all things is the truth. As auditor, director for Infraspect, I have to keep my auditors well disciplined so that they do not get sucked into the social, sentimental dialogues that lead to the sectarian tension. We're not objective. No way. We're not objectified. We don't go that way. We run our 22 articles to test ourselves when we're in a community trying to work their way out of a dysfunction. Most of the communities are merely dysfunctioning. As we advance further and further into the austerity programming that's at the city, state, county levels, all the fake budgetary stuff, the budgets are fake. If you want to see how fake, go into the CAFR system, the CAFRA, or the Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports at the federal, state, local, county level. And you'll see that the asset, the pro forma balances, are really in the green, and they got a lot of money they're pushing around. Where they get their money and what they do in these conveyances and conversions of public assets is amazingly corrupt. But it's the way we do business, and the commissioners are usually running their underlying motives. They're instructed and oriented in training sessions on how to take care of their underlying motives, their own interests.
William, when they tried to kill me, I had just run building number 7 on the cover of my magazine, and I kind of thought that was it. But in retrospect, looking back, the 9/11 was so full of holes. I mean, their whole story. George Bush made me look sick as a conspiracy theorist. That there was a lot of people that woke up from that. Wait a minute. The government says those buildings fell down because of fire. They woke a lot of people up. So I don't think they cared about that. But I also had in the centerfold of that magazine the idea and the concept for Liberty Villages. And to this day, the Liberty Villages is all based around an old, ancient, Indian-style village, but with modern conveniences, all the charm of the 19th century, all the convenience of the 21st. And I actually believe that is the reason they tried to kill me. They went in and took my land. They set somebody up to buy my property from me, which is right on White Sands Abyssal Range, which has an income. And they took that from me. And I think, my reasoning here is if we can grow our own food, if we can work together as a community the way the Amish do, we set it up in low-cost structures, so you're living in a teepee that only costs you $3,000, so you don't have to pay $300,000 for that 2,000 square foot house in the middle of the city. And you grow your own food, and you generate your own energy from the sun and the wind. You know, I said Obama's idea of greening America is to build to sell the top of that mountain to a foreign corporation so they can put up wind generators. Why not cut out the middleman?
In the Millennium Development Goals, and these higher-end doctrines such as globally integrated enterprises under proof of concept, everything is the profit, the bottom line profit thing. Now, there's two things that come to mind as you speak. One is that, and that covers the underlying motive, but also that what you're proposing, and the reason that you're being targeted is that, like most rural ranching communities and farm communities, which they try to destroy their viability by inclusionary rezoning. In other words, you're not viable unless you're 50,000 acres. That was a bad manipulation. But what you're talking about is providing, enhancing community security, food security, as well as everything else. And that's not on the agenda under the austerity programs to force a global parliamentary system of government. The UN runs austerity programs. They call them sanctions against the terrorists and so forth, but we still have this problem. We don't know what terrorists look like because there's not enough of them, so we demonize